So, friend of the channel is back with another FNAF video. We did Charlotte the Puppet. We did Elizabeth Afton. We did Michael Afton last week. And now we're doing another Afton. And you can make the argument that not only the most important Afton, but the most important character in the series of Five Nights at Freddy's, William Afton, the GOAT, Matthew Lillard himself. If William Afton didn't exist, FNAF would not exist, and I don't even know what I would be doing in the Lord's year 2026. And since this is a FNAF video, a couple things I want to address before we dive into this. One, quick thing is Steel Wool just announced. I'm currently doing a stream at 11:20 p.m., so I don't know when you're watching this, but in a week from now, Steel Wool just announced that they are releasing Secret of the Mimic on the PS VR 2. Now, I'm not going to be playing Secret of the Mimic. If you want to see my playthrough of Secret of the Mimic, you can go to the YouTube archive channel, and we have the full playlist of all the episodes. And not only that, but speaking of the FNAF archive episodes, especially Secret of the Mimic, I am currently working on a way for all my, at this moment, only FNAF playthroughs, but maybe I do it for other Let's Play series I did to completion, like Cuphead and God of War 2018 and Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm 4. I am currently rendering and editing and squeezing together all my episodes, all my parts into one complete episode. So if you, for some reason, want to binge my, 10, 11 hour playthrough playing Secret of the Mimic, this is one video. There's no cut parts or cut content. It's all right there in one video for you to watch. And then randomly, you're on YouTube at like 3 in the morning, and my video is just randomly playing at like hour 5, like how we've all experienced. Or is that just a me thing? I don't think so. So that's one. That's the small thing is Steel Wool just announced that they are now releasing Secret of the Mimic PS over VR 2. I'm acknowledging that they are doing it, and I'm not doing it because A, I don't have a PSVR headset. 2, streaming is a lot harder in VR. Even if I did have a PSVR headset, it's a lot harder to do streaming in VR. So I am good with the playthrough that I did for Secret of the Mimic. But that's the small thing. The main thing I want to talk about before we dive into the video of Michael Afton, or not Michael Afton, of William Afton. But speaking of, it was something that happened last week's video about Michael Afton. And I'm just here to tell you right now, especially since it's a FNAF video, and I understand there's probably going to be an, let's just say, increase of viewership going to my channel to watch this video. I love you all platonically. This is going to come from a place of respect and love. Again, platonically. I don't do certain content, or I don't decide I'm going to upload this or not continue this series because of views. All right? I do what I want to do. I upload what I want to upload. I play what I want to play, and I do the type of content that I want to do. I don't get motivated by views. So I just wanted to address that. I do the FNAF stuff because I've been a fan since the series began in 2014, and I am someone who has always been focused on the story and the lore, and I'm someone who, behind the scenes when the camera isn't on and everything, I always would watch people's videos, theories, and hear how they are able to piece together Easter eggs, books, and I would always pause the video like I would do in these streams, and I would be like, let me ramble for a couple minutes and let me think about, is that something I can understand, or am I able to find a few loopholes or plot holes, or give my own thoughts on what I'm hearing? So what I do in the theorist reaction streams I've been doing the last like year and a half, 2 years, I've been doing that off camera and I've enjoyed it. So I just carried that over to on cam. I say all that because I've been on this internet space for, let's see, I started doing internet YouTube stuff for like 2015. So I've been doing this stuff for 11 years. And there's never been a point where I've made decisions based on, oh, this isn't getting views, so I should stop this. Or this gets views, so I should do this. Trust me, if I was doing stuff for views in the Lord's year 2026, believe me, the content you see right now would be totally different. Because the two ways you get views in the Lord's year 2026 on YouTube is two ways. A, political commentary channels that intentionally goes against the grain, is very contrarian, and not only that, but is very, very aggressive and vocal on the beliefs. That's one way to gain views in a fast way on YouTube. Clearly, I don't do political stuff. And two, sports betting websites and sponsorships. Anyone with a pulse can be sponsored by FanDuel or Prize Picks or BetMGM or whatever, DraftKings or whatever betting website out there. That's another way to get money and views, is sports betting. And I bring up this message for, as a learn lesson for you as well, watching the video, is don't make decisions or don't be driven by things solely based on money alone. Go off your own beliefs and what you think is right. I don't do stuff that I personally don't enjoy in exchange for money or sponsorships. And I hope that is clear now that I addressed that. Anyways, I just want to address that no, I don't do FNAF stuff for views, and I don't start series or end series or do this or do that or stop doing that or cut back on this because of it gets a lot of views or it doesn't get views. Hell, if we're going specifically on FNAF, there are certain FNAF videos, and not only that, certain FNAF theories we've done where it's gotten no views. And I'm still doing the FNAF theories to this day. Why? Because I enjoy it. So, anyways, enough said there. TLDR, Cliff Notes summary. I do not do things on this YouTube page or anything for that matter based on views. I do it based on what I personally want to make and create and enjoy, because I think that is what is the most fun for me, and I hope that fun that I have and passion comes through in the video for your entertainment. All right? Cool. All right. Enough said there. Enough of the serious stuff. Let's get back into the fun stuff.
The main villain of all of Five Nights at Freddy's, but a man with that much infamy honestly muddies his own water. How much of William Afton do we actually know for fact? And how much of it is speculation that we've been taken for granted? For example, we all know that William Afton is obsessed with immortality, but that's never once stated in-game. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Starting this off in a way that makes the most sense, how do we know William Afton exists in the first place? Well, technically, his name is first mentioned in the book The Silver Eyes, where he's the antagonist, a guy who owned the original Freddy's restaurant and is pretending to be somebody else to get close to it. He ends up trying to kill people again, but then they work against him, and eventually somebody activates the spring locks in the spring bodysuit he's wearing, and it kills him. But again, he's named William Afton. And in the very next game, Sister Location, we get an opening of some shareholder talking to a Mr. Afton, who's making the animatronics. So that's pretty straightforward there. It's even more noteworthy that Sister Location is one of the first narrative-based games, and it opens with Mr. Afton. But if that's not enough for you, in FNAF 6, the last main game that Scott made, in the credits, the voice of Scraptrap is given the name William Afton. So there you go. So we know this guy's named William Afton, and that he is the guy who ends up as Scraptrap. What else do we know about him? Let's go game by game and talk about what we know about the purple guy. Like most of these lore videos, FNAF 1 is pretty quick, because at this point, Scott really didn't have a story in mind. This was his crapshoot game. So all we really know is that the missing child incident happened.
Well, I wouldn't say FNAF 1 was a crapshoot game, but I feel like FNAF 1 doesn't get talked about at all anymore, simply because it was the original game, and I feel like we know the story, we know all the Easter eggs. Like, that game has literally been sliced apart for the last 12 years, so there's nothing new you can find or say in FNAF 1, the original, right? I feel like that's it. Also, I feel like another reason why the story in FNAF 1 is very, very simple, I brought this up time and time again, is, as we all know, Scott, before Five Nights at Freddy's became the internet conglomerate corporation that has blockbuster movies now, Scott Cawthon was a failing indie game developer working a part-time job at I think it was a Dollar General, and he did indie game, and they all flopped, and none of them made any money, and they are all ripped to shreds and poor reviewed on Steam and Game Jolt. And he was like, all right, I keep making these games. They are not succeeding, but it's like those, motivational lines from like any successful athlete or any motivational speaker that, oh, every single time I failed, I found a way to keep getting up and everything. He was like, all right, I'm going to make this game, Five Nights at Freddy's, based on a pizzeria haunted, inspired by Chuck E. Cheese, and this either is going to work or it's not. And if it doesn't work, then this is my last attempt at games. I'm never going to be attempting to make games again. And we obviously know whether it was a success or a failure, and we obviously know what happened next. So I bring that up to say that there's no way Scott would have known that for your last attempt to make a game, you would think, oh, this series is going to blow up and be this mega giant that it is 12, 13 years later, have movies attached to it, have Purple Guys and Fazgoo and Bonnie Guppies and Glitch Traps and VR mimics. It's just not gonna happen.
Something that, William Afton did, but we don't even find that out until later. We just know somebody killed kids here. We'll move on for now. At the time of FNAF 2's release, again, not really anything about William Afton, but in retrospect, we know for a fact that these death minigames we see are things that William Afton did. Save Them, Take Cake to the Children, and Foxy Go 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 in particular are showing William Afton's crimes. The missing child incident, the dead child incident, which we'll have to talk about eventually, and killing Charlotte Emily outside of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We also know from this sprite from Save Them that he was wearing some sort of badge, so likely he was working there at the time of Save Them, or at least put on the uniform. Either that or this is like a weird stain on his shirt. It's unclear. Scott's never been a great pixel artist. These aren't really technically pixel art, but regardless. And finally, we hear from Phone Guy that somebody used a yellow suit in the back that was not meant to be used, and then the animatronics started going haywire. We can again, with later context, assume this is William Afton. Moving on to FNAF 3, we get our first actual visual of William Afton. Many, many years after he died. It's Springtrap. Springtrap and his creations. The Phantom animatronics. Now, is Springtrap making them, or is it a hallucination because of lack of oxygen? It's unclear, because technically Agony could do that, but all we know for certain is that's what
It's sound illusion discs.
William Afton, and he was found in a hidden wall broken into back room.
Because is it a coincidence that every single time the Phantom animatronics popped up at you and you had the ventilation errors, you heard a very ominous, high-pitching sound effect that that's probably very annoying on video, I apologize. But again, that very high-pitched frequency, sound illusion discs. making you see and believe things that aren't actually there. And what do we know the phantoms are? They're not real animatronics, they're ghosts, they're hallucinations.
At a Freddy's location, according to the guy giving us phone calls. We also see in the in-between night minigames, the Follow Me minigames, how he ended up back there. He was at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza taking apart the animatronics one by one until eventually he was cornered by the spirits at that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, to which he puts on the Spring Bonnie suit to try to scare them off, but since it's dilapidated, it closes in on him, killing him inside, and leaving him stuck in that back room. Why exactly he's stuck back there is some light speculation, but we hear in this same game that there's a back room in every Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that is not on the cameras and animatronics do not understand it exists. So we see in the Follow Me minigames that they try to go in, but they can't. They keep getting stuck. There's, to them, nothing there. So I like to think that he's primarily stuck back there because since the spring lock's activated, Spring Bonnie is in show mode. And in show mode, Spring Bonnie doesn't understand this back room. It should not exist. So that might be why he's stuck back there. But that is technically speculation. There's just not a lot of lines to connect those dots. They're pretty close already. FNAF 4 is interesting.
FNAF 4 is FNAF 4. We've been over this time and time and time again.
Because on one hand, canon...
Again, I've said this time and time again. If you have any attempt at trying to solve FNAF 4, I salute you, soldier. Because I wouldn't try to wish out my worst enemy in trying to solve what even is FNAF 4, what that even is about.
Wise. What's in the text wise? There's only one appearance of William Afton the entire time. Definitively. And that's helping this guy put a suit on in a back room. And frankly, that could be any guy in the shadows. It just kind of...
Alright, Willem Dafoe. Man. Fun casting experience for a second. What would it have been like in the FNAF movies, instead of being Matthew Lillard, the GOAT, it was Willem Dafoe? I mean, his face definitely looks way more demented and twisted than Matthew Lillard, respectfully. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't really like the casting of Willem Dafoe because every single time I would see Willem Dafoe on screen playing a villain, my mind would just immediately go to, he's just Norman Osborn. What is Norman Osborn doing in FNAF?
Kinda looks like William Afton because he's purple. That being said, with Sister Location, the very next game, showing a plush Fredbear with a walkie-talkie, many people think that these speech bubbles are William Afton talking to the crying child throughout his day. Is that actually what's happening? There's a lot of ways to interpret this. I have a pretty wild one on the podcast. If I remember to, I'll link it right here. That involves the whole entirety of FNAF 4 being fake. But as far as like the actual evidence here, in-game, we really don't have a reason to believe that he is Fredbear. But with Sister Location in mind, it is heavily suggested that William Afton is the one speaking through the plush Fredbear. And in that sense, after the crying child dies, he promises to put him back together. So let's go to Sister Location.
So the whole thing about Psychic Friend Fredbear, the plush Fredbear, Golden Freddy with the walkie-talkie, him having one shade of yellow throughout the nights, but then once it got to night 5, him having still yellow, but a different shade of yellow. I don't know if I ever said this in my many FNAF theory videos, but one interpretation I've had, so I'm just going to throw it out there, and let me know if you agree or disagree and call me a big fucking idiot, but I've always interpreted as William Afton speaking through the plushie throughout all the nights, and that's why he has a dark yellow text. But then, in the beginning of night 5, I want to say it still has that same shade of yellow from the plushie Fredbear. But it's not getting through the FNAF 4 crying child after he was bitten and rushed to hospital. So that's when William Afton unplugged, so to speak, the plushie And that's why it was still a shade of yellow, but it wasn't the same shade because he was no longer talking through the plushie. He was talking to his son personally as he was dying, you know? Like, it's still the same voice, William Afton talking to his dead son, but it's just changed the context of how he's speaking. That's why, yeah, it's a shade of yellow, but it's different, you know? Because again, we all know Scott loves to do color correction and details, and a different shade of color or different color outright signifies, oh, this detail. We all know Scott loves to do that, especially in FNAF 4 Insist location. That's why Circus Baby's eyes are blue, but then Elizabeth Afton's eyes are green, and then that's why we see Baby's eyes green after every iteration after that, because it possessed Elizabeth Afton, who had green eyes.
I already mentioned the game once. This is a big game for William Afton and Afton lore in general. Elizabeth, Michael, even the Crying Child a little bit. But like, this is a big, hey, let's learn about the Aftons kind of game. We learned that Circus Baby's Pizza World was going to be a thing. This is more in the teasers, but it's the idea that William Afton was doing these spin-offs. We learned that the sister location bunker is under the Afton household. We learned that Afton needed to appeal to shareholders to fund this business. So he's not made of endless money. He does need to fund this somehow. We know that the fun times he's creating are capable of kidnapping children.
Even though I feel like money has been not something that's been talked about at all, because it's very loose. Because again, how Fazbear Entertainment is able to make location after location after location, not only that, but bigger and grander every single time, despite every previous location having missing kids and outright child murder, but how they're able to stay in business and make even bigger businesses each time following child murder doesn't get explained. Like, for instance, at the end of FNAF 6, and I think it was the canon ending, actually, where you salvage all the animatronics, you fight all of them, and then you get the iconic Henry speech. After the iconic Henry speech, Hand Unit Andy Field, the GOAT, gets back on tape, and he says, like, Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity and everything. It's been complete shut down. But then you have the FNAF VR Help Wanted game, and then you have Security Breach, the Pizzaplex, this big mall. So Fazbear Entertainment's no longer a corporate entity, but you now have these VR games in this giant mall Pizzaplex? Okay.
According to the blueprints, we know that William sent his son, Michael Afton, into that bunker under the explicit directions of putting her back together, to which he does all of Sister Location, and we know that he didn't stick around. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, Michael Afton's whole monologue at the end of Sister Location is like, I'm going to come find you. Something went wrong. It is your fault. I'm going to come find you. Which, frankly, would be a weird ending if William Afton is just around the bunker. Like, if he's just chilling in the living room. Michael Afton wouldn't have to say, I'm going to come find you. He'd just have to go home. He's right there. So, I think this line is directly stating that William Afton is no longer in the picture by the end of Sister Location. I think William is likely gone before Sister Location even happens, and that's why Michael Afton goes down in the first place. But again, that's speculation.
Also, another reason why I think it even furthers that point is that explains why in FNAF 4, because again, I am in the headcanon that Sister Location comes before FNAF 4. For instance, that's why the girl's room that you see in the house is empty. Because the girl, originally Elizabeth Afton, the room is now empty because she's dead. She's now underneath the house in the Sister Location bunker connected to Circus Baby. And that's why in the FNAF 4 house, the only two human characters you see in that house is the Crying Child and the older brother, Michael Afton. There is no William Afton because, again, he's under the bunker doing the testing chamber experiments on the FNAF 4 house on Michael Afton. And Mrs. Afton, she's either gone or she's dead, something, but she's out the picture. And people widely assume, myself included, that Mrs. Afton is tied to the persona of Ballora. So again, there's no mother character, no Mrs. Afton. William Afton is underneath the house in the bunker doing testing chambers. The sister's gone, she's dead, so that only leaves two Aftons left. The FNAF 4 crying child and the older brother. And that's why he has to babysit him, and that's why he bullies him, because there is literally no one left to tell him no.
Just know that by the end of the game, William is MIA. But not for long, because in FNAF 6, Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, he's back. Again. He always comes back. This is actually the first time in-game he says that, as far as I'm aware. Although I guess it's technically the first time he talks at all, so not a huge surprise. But we learn more than just William Afton showed up to the Pizzeria Simulator and burnt to a crisp. Most of the minigames in FNAF 6 directly feature William Afton. Fruity Maze shows one of the tactics William Afton used to kidnap one of the missing child incident kids, namely Susie. He tells her that her recently run-over dog isn't dead, he's just in a back room, and he'll show her, luring her into the back room to kill her and stuff her into Chica. We see the aftermath of him.
We know it's Chica because the book's original trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, talk about it as well, that Susie is tied to Chica, but also in FNAF 6, the Lore Keeper ending, where you get the gravestones on top of the hill. You have Gabriel, Jeremy, Fritz, and Susie. The fifth one off to the side in the grass is Cassie the Golden Freddy. Then the one in the back off the hill is Charlie or Charlotte the Puppet. It's Susie because it's the one girl name, that's one, and two, how the headstones, gravestones are arranged. It's the same orientation as the headless masks at the end of FNAF 3, whether you get the good or bad ending. Chica's always the third one off into the back behind the other heads. So then you have the Susie Gravestone, who is also third and kind of behind the others. It also would make sense why, don't have a boy name on Chica who's clearly a girl animatronic. That also is another point.
Him killing Charlotte Emily in Take Cake to the Children, but this is a more realistic showing of a dead Charlotte in an alleyway. But note the tire tracks and rain here, because this, I think, is enough evidence to argue that Midnight Motorist is also showing us William Afton. Now, some people argue this guy isn't William Afton because he is not purple. Fair.
And I was in that camp at one point. I was banging that gong drum, whatever you want to say, that I was in this camp up until, honestly, I think the release of Secret of the Mimic. I was in this camp that Orange Bustard Man in Midnight Motorist and FNAF 6 was not William Afton. It was Henry, it was Edwin, it was Michael Afton, it was some unknown character we never heard of yet, but it could not be William Afton. Because again, you see, and I was talked about this as well with the color details that I brought up earlier in the stream, talking about the shade of yellow with the plushie with William Afton, also the eye color with Elizabeth Afton and Baby. But we all know Scott loves color details and changing colors to hint at hidden subliminal messaging, right? You see a purple car and your instinct is, oh, I see a purple car. This is not the first time we've seen a purple car in this series. And two, purple has always been the color of the Aftons, specifically William Afton. That's always been his color. So when you see a purple car and you're like, oh, I'm expecting to see someone who comes out and is purple, but it's not. It tells me that it's supposed to be a different character because If it was William Afton, why would you not make him purple? He's been purple in every other 8-bit minigame throughout this entire series, and now this is the one minigame where you want to change his color for some reason. It's like, no, he has to be a different character, but I am willing to accept defeat and yield, being like, no, Midnight Motorist, I'm willing to accept the fact this probably is William Afton. It's fine.
I would say that, if he was purple, it'd be impossible to see him on this screen, but fair. Regardless, the fact that
no, the reason why, I guess, little history lesson for you, but the reason why William Afton has been purple in all these minigames throughout the series is because he's supposed to be a shadow character. But because shadow characters would be so hard to see in black, you literally would not be able to see him if he was a black character. They had to instead make the shadow character represented by purple.
there's tire tracks leaving a raining scene of Charlotte Emily's death, and the name of Midnight Motorist in the code is later that night, is a strong enough connection to suggest that this is direct evidence of William Afton being the Midnight Motorist driver, driving back to his broken home. Now, who the guy on the couch and the runaway are, that's argumentative. I think it's Mrs. Afton and Michael Afton is the runaway, but that's speculation. Push it aside. FNAF World isn't super relevant to William Afton, but Ultimate Custom Night is, because it is basically explicitly stated that all of Ultimate Custom Night is just a forever purgatory torture hell for William Afton specifically. There are several voice lines directly stating that this guy, the guy dying in UCN, is the reason for all of this. He did this to other people, he created all of these animatronics, he's why we're here. That's gotta be William Afton. But if that's not good enough for you, there's a couple other points to it too. There's this Easter egg where you're in Old Man Consequence's lake, in the background you can hear this. And like, if one guy is yelling for help...
I thought he says help, not Henry. Is that a typo?
From Mike and Henry? Well, the guy being tortured can't be Mike or Henry. It's gotta be William. Not to mention Old Man Consequences himself says, leave the demon to his demons. So we're talking about a bad guy here. William Afton is near definitively the player character in Ultimate Custom Night. But then, what about the games after that? After all, he dies in FNAF 6 and is in a forever purgatory in Ultimate Custom Night. So what about Glitch Trap and Help Wanted and Security Breach, Help Wanted 2 and all that? That gets tricky. This gets speculative. Because here's the thing. There is good argumentation for Glitch Trap to be in some ways possessed by William Afton. But I don't think there's good argumentation for that to happen before Glitch Trap is created. Because here's the conundrum. In Security Breach, we learned that Vanny, under the control of Glitch Trap, used Glamrock Freddy to dig under the Pizzaplex and uncover the FNAF 6 pizzeria underneath the Security Breach Pizzaplex.
Really? Really? Hold on, I may need to go back and read some of the journal entries from Security Breach, but really? It was Freddy who did it? Okay. That's a little bit bizarre. Again, I may have to go back because I don't remember that at all. That is completely new to me as I'm hearing that. But my mind would really go to is either the staff bots who Vanny controls throughout the game, or two, the blob underneath the FNAF 6 location that digs out of things in the Pizzaplex. That's what it does. That's widely believed one of the reasons why the Pizzaplex is in such a ruin by the time we get to, well, aforementioned name, FNAF Security Breach Ruin, is because the blob dug itself out under the FNAF 6 location out of the Pizzaplex. It was not an earthquake.
And in there, they find a burnt corpse that looks a lot like a burnt version of Scrap Trap from FNAF 6. a post-fire scrap trap, aptly named Burn Trap. Some people argue it's not William Afton, but guys. And the thing that holds me up about this whole process, if Glitch Trap was possessed by William Afton in some way, we've created a paradox. Because Glitch Trap is the one that uncovers William Afton's body. But if William Afton was already possessing Glitch Trap, how would he uncover himself? Because Glitch Trap was formed when they scanned in old technology that they scooped up and didn't let the company hold on to. Now, before Secret of the Mimic, we all were pretty certain it was something to do with William Afton, but now that we know of the Mimic's existence and the fact that there's old technology that houses the Mimic blueprints on it, it seems way more likely that Glitch Trap is just a manifestation of the Mimic, and then the Mimic was the one to go down and dig up William Afton. That seems like it makes a lot more sense. So I would argue that Glitch Trap is the Mimic mimicking William Afton. After all, they put a program that recreates everything it sees with the knowledge it already has, which would likely be of William Afton, which we'll get into a game that is comprised of nothing but the worst crimes William Afton ever did. So the idea that it wants to recreate those makes a lot of sense. That being said, there's no direct lore of William Afton in Help Wanted for that reason. Whereas in Security Breach, he's back, kinda, as Burn Trap. He exits a charging pod and gets scooped up by the blob in a non-canon ending. But the fact that this ending could happen, I think implies that Burn Trap is at least down there. And according to Gregory's drawings that perfectly recreate these scenes, maybe this did happen at some point. It's hard to say. Help Wanted 2, like Help Wanted 1, is similarly not very helpful for William Afton. This game is more so in the Mimic timeline of things, but it is worthwhile to note that Glitch Trap is here as well. And at this point in the timeline, Glitch Trap could be possessed by William Afton. After all, he's been unearthed at this point, so there's a possibility there. I don't think it's likely though. And finally, Secret of the Mimic, which we learn actually a lot about William Afton and his business practices. Essentially, Fazbear Entertainment and Murray's Costume Manor had a relationship that went back way into the 70s, to the point where Edwin's father knew about them and said not to trust them. So they go way back. But once Murray's Costume Manor started going under, William Afton saw an opportunity, and he gave them a contract that would have fixed all of their financial problems, but it was incredibly work intensive, and anytime Murray's Costume Manor got close, he'd change the contract, or have them redo something, wasting their time and wasting what little money they had left. All the while as the company is crumbling, William Afton was working with an insider to get all the contact information for every employee in Murray's Costume Manor, and personally reach out to them with better jobs, poaching their employees. So he was actively carving into this company, destroying it from the inside, and once it was just on the brink, William Afton sends this letter, which essentially says, hey, I know your business is failing, but don't worry. We'll buy everything and you can work
software development and the entire MCM catalog. We would love to keep you on as the lead engineer. Talking about Edwin, I'm assuming. Although we now technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. We feel this offer has been more than fair considering how far behind you are. It's just too much for you to handle alone. We're waiting for your response, W.A. William Afton.
Work for me instead, and you can even still live in your house, but I'll own it. You can live in it, but I'll own it. Which is crazy. So even before he's a child murderer, he was still an evil, greedy capitalist, otherwise known as a capitalist. Yes, I've made that joke before. I'm gonna make it every time. It's funny. But besides William Afton being a seedy businessman, we also know that he knows about the Mimic. The whole reason the game Secret of the Mimic exists is because Fazbear is sending technicians to retrieve the Mimic endoskeleton, which implies that Fazbear knows about it and wants it. So we can assume that eventually they get it, right? By the end of Secret of the Mimic is off somewhere. It's either wandering into the woods, having a fun party in the basement, or asleep in a non-canon ending. But we know that by Security Breach, the Mimic is trapped in the FNAF 6 underground bunker. So at some point they captured it, not to mention things like the Mex's console and the Fiona console being completely out of nowhere. So clearly William Afton got his hands on this technology at some point. We're just not sure when or what he did with it. You could have watched this video.
No. Sorry, not Spawn.
To be clear, these books are a completely separate story than what we see in-game. They barely line up at all. Some of the names still match, but even then, it's not great. It is essentially an alternate universe telling of the FNAF storyline. I like to think of it as a shared universe. Essentially, the laws of the universe are the same, and some of the people in them are the same.
Separate or otherwise, separate canons, same continuity, same universe umbrella. It all exists under the FNAF universe umbrella, but everything you hear about in the books does not automatically mean it's the same in the games and vice versa. Everything you see in the games is not the same in the books. Right?
People, but completely different events unfolded. That being said, it is worthwhile to bring up that in the Silver Eyes, William Afton does the missing child incident and then leaves town and uses a fake name to come back to lay low and avoid being imprisoned, and he remains nearby the Freddy's location trying to find it. In the continuity of the Silver Eyes, they basically build a mall on top and around Freddy's and just like hide it in a back room somewhere, which is crazy, but whatever. But throughout the trilogy, we learn that William Afton's main motivations are seeking immortality and trying to become a perfect being, more than William Afton was, more than Springtrap is alone, some immortal thing. He's also obsessed with Henry Emily. William Afton kept a journal in the books, and they describe his writings of Henry as constantly flipping between insane adoration and intense hatred. So he had feelings. We love a little bit of toxic old man Yowie. But the Silver Eyes aren't the only books that we get lore about William Afton in. Then in comes Fazbear Frights. And
the whole thing about, you know, the dynamic of William and Henry, hatred, jealousy, worship, it goes back to the point of why does William Afton kill? Why does he lash out at specifically Henry's child, Charlotte? Because, again, I bring back the quote time and time again, is Steel Wool isn't just making William Afton be a monster just to kill people for sake of it. He's doing it for reasons he seems. I'm not saying I agree, or it is, but he, in his twisted mind, thinks that's justified. Other wrongdoings happen in his life that cause him to lash out and kill. And that's why, you know, I'm going to point to this of William Afton and Henry. Did they have separate businesses? And William Afton may have been the one who had the failing business. Meanwhile, you had someone like Henry who, as we know, is a genius inventor. He's able to make magic out of literally wood figurines. He's able to make animatronic magic out of literally nothing. He has a successful business. William Afton's business, his dream to have an animatronic pizzeria location, is going under. So Henry, being the successful business owner, buys William Afton out to save him, and that makes him jealous because he felt that success is robbed because he's around someone else, a business partner, who is more successful than him, and that made him vengeful, and that made him lash out and kill Charlotte because, again, he felt jealous of Henry's success. At least, that is one interpretation that I've always liked and I will keep repeating. But let me know your thoughts if you think it's that interpretation of William Afton having a failing business, Henry buys him out, and that's what causes William Afton to lash out and kill Charlotte, or is it Henry's business was failing and William Afton buys him out, and because Henry was a genius contractor but wasn't able to make a successful business, meanwhile William Afton was, that made Henry like some independent contractor employee to William Afton, And that's when the spring locks get introduced. And that's when something like the FNAF 4 spring locks we see in FNAF 4 caused the biting incident that killed the FNAF 4 crying child. That made William Afton lash out and kill Henry's daughter Charlotte, because, hey, Henry's creation, the spring locks, killed William Afton's child, so now he's going to lash out and make him see how it feels by killing one of his own children, Henry's. I don't know if I worded that the best, but you get what I'm trying to say. Or is there a third interpretation that I'm not even considering? Let me know your thoughts of what you think.
I want to preface this by saying I think it's incredibly unlikely that these stories take place in the game's timeline, much like the novel trilogy, but I do think they're useful to talk about, because there's a story pretty much exactly about William Afton, and that's The Man in Room 1280. That story is an alternate version of the aftermath of FNAF 6. Essentially, paramedics rescued a corpse from a burning building. But corpse isn't exactly correct, because the man is somehow alive. His body is so burnt it's mostly translucent, and he should be dead. In fact, at some points they try to put him out of his misery, but whenever somebody tries to kill him, a strange ghost of a boy prevents them from doing so. In fact, when they scan his brain, there seems to be two consciousnesses inside of it. It's not until a priest seems to get through to William Afton enough to understand he wants to go to a Fazbear distribution warehouse that once he's there, William Afton just explodes into agony onto a bunch of artifacts, like FNAF merchandise and random old animatronic parts. And that's what causes all the epilogues of Fazbear Frights, and several of the stories themselves. Pretty much most of the haunted objects are explained by William Afton's agony infusing into something. And those objects are not only the main antagonists of most of the Fazbear Frights stories, but they are what's collected during the epilogues. So,
not only that, but more details to share in the room, The Man 1280. About details about the boy. And cut into Ultimate Custom Night is not only is this boy latched on to William Afton, well, I'm going to call it a stand-in, because he's never named William Afton, but I'm going to call him William Afton because, again, someone who should be dead in a burning building, but is not, but is kept alive. You know who I'm talking about. So, a boy is not letting him die, has attached to his body his soul. Couple things about it. A, the boy is wearing an alligator mask. I bring that up because think about what we see in Ultimate Custom Night. Someone who is fishing by a lake with what looks like an alligator mask. Now, I'm not saying the person fishing by the lake in the alligator mask is the same boy. That would be Cassidy, linked to William Afton's soul. No, but I think it's interesting of how you have a book of someone wearing an alligator mask tied to William Afton's soul, not letting him die, and then you have Ultimate Custom, right? The game where a boy is not letting William Afton die. Something inside that game is a character with what looks like an alligator mask. Coincidence? I think not. But also, we know the boy is not just some random boy. We know the reason why his name in the book is Andrew, why Andrew is latching on to William Afton's soul and not letting him die, keeping him protected, because he wants this man to suffer like he suffered, because William Afton killed him in a brutal way. So he wanted to get his revenge and make him suffer for it. What do we know about Cassidy in Ultimate Custom Night? He's named the Vengeful Spirit. What do we know about the entire point of Ultimate Custom Night? Cassidy, the Vengeful Spirit, is keeping William Afton down in the Custom Night and not letting him die, not letting him put out of his misery, keep killing him and killing him and killing him with his own creations to make him suffer like William Afton made him suffer.
Why am I bringing this up? Because, again, I don't think this could happen in the game's timeline. In the FNAF 6 bunker, William Afton is burnt alive within the Springtrap suit. First of all, his body is intertwined with it, and then it's further burnt. In the story of the Man in Room 1280, there is no animatronic suit on the man. So either paramedics get to the scene and the suit fully melted off, or while at the scene, they unintertwined his body with the suit and then pulled him out. Both of which are just a little too far for belief. Not to mention that in the games, we see a burnt corpse that looks a lot like William Afton in the last place we saw William Afton get burnt. Sometimes a spade is a spade, but I bring this up because it gives us good insight to how Ultimate Custom Night might have worked, because this is basically the book's version of Ultimate Custom Night. Now that's all the book lore, but...
Well, we also know that fire doesn't work in this series. FNAF 3, the first time fire's been used, especially on someone like William Afton, the place gets burned. He survives because he always comes back. In FNAF 6, you lure everyone together and burn it down even hotter. It doesn't do anything because Scrap Trap is now Burn Trap underneath the pizza plats. The ending in the Cicada Breach, where it's the Burn Trap blob ending, may or may not be canon. It's still very questionable. So, fire never works in this series.
We're not done. There's one more thing I should bring up. I mentioned earlier that Circus Baby's Pizza World existed, but I didn't mention how we knew. Well, one of the teasers in the lead up to Sister Location showed this graphic if you brightened the image. It's a newspaper clipping saying that Circus Baby's Pizza World was going to open, but the day before opening closed due to gas leaks and the entire project was abandoned. It seems fairly logical that this was actually because Circus Baby killed Elizabeth Afton, but it's notable that this is showing us a whole restaurant was planned, not just the party and rental. So that's all.
Yep. And to this day, we've never seen Circus Baby's Pizza World. The thing we play in Sister Location is the bunker, but we never have seen the Pizza World to this day. Which, I don't know how bizarre that is. At least I think so.
The direct lore about William Afton. And yeah, it's a lot. So when we talk about speculation, what speculative evidence do we have of William Afton? Well, this is what's tricky about this. William Afton specifically is tricky to fit into this format, because most of what we know definitively about William Afton is his actions. What he does. The things he actively caused. Most speculation about William Afton involves the why. His motivations. Like, for example, we know he did the missing child incident. We know he killed 5 children in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and stuffed them into animatronic suits. But it is never once explained to us why he did that. Never is it even closely stated as to why he did that. It gets a little bit in the books, but as far as the games go, not once is it said why he does that. Mainly because in the games, we never really get characterization of William Afton. We never meet the guy. He's not in the game. He's in effect a cause, a miasma around the games. It's because FNAF is sort of this like true crime adjacent series, right? Like the story of Five Nights at Freddy's isn't the plot. We're not surviving the missing child incident, we're learning about it because of what happened because of it. So we don't get to know a lot about William Afton, the guy.
I will say another reason why I think we don't bring up the missing children's incident at all in this series when it comes to theories at this point, since again this series has been going on for 12 plus years, is at this point there's so many games, there's so many books, there's now movies, where there's so many different stories out there, so many different games, and so many different important characters and named characters that we learn more about, and we actually have characterization and we actually see that they get way more attention, way more screen time, and they're way more important and way more interesting than the 5 core 4 kids, right? Like Elizabeth Afton gets a good amount of screen time and is a pretty important character in this series. Charlotte is a pretty important character in this series. Vanessa is a pretty important character in this series. David, Edwin is now important in this series. But the missing children's incident kids, the Gabriel, the Jeremy, the Fritz, the Susie, they're just a nameplate on a gravesite and the lore keeper in FNAF 6. Cool. That's it. But they don't have much else to say. We don't really care about them. Those 5 kids were due to a back room and killed. That's fine. It's tragic. Who cares? Let's talk more about William Afton now. Or let's talk more about Charlotte, the puppet now. Right? It's kind of like how Freddy, the brown bear, in the Core 4 is one of the least interesting characters, despite the series is named after him. Like, Bonnie is important because, well, at least Spring Bonnie, Golden Bonnie, is the character that William Afton uses to kill kids and create all of his crimes. So Bonnie's important. Chica is now very, very important because they're tied to Edwin's costume manor and the Mimic. So she's important. And Freddy is just there. He just exists. Like, there's no legitimate story or any interesting details about the brown bear, Golden Freddy. Now, Golden Freddy, yeah, there is a lot of important stuff. But as far as the brown bear, he just exists.
I think that's part of the reason why the fandom latched so strongly onto the Talbert files. Something that, on the surface, frankly, seemed fake immediately. Arguably, obviously fake. But a lot of people wanted to believe this, not only because it was cool that we found a new thing, but because it gave us characterization of William Afton, something we've never had before, something that most of this fandom desperately craves for good reason. But, that was fake, so we gotta figure it out ourselves. So what speculation is there about William Afton's motivations? So let's start with the quick and boring one. William Afton doesn't have a personal motivation. He just likes killing people, and he stumbled into the whole possession immortality thing. For whatever reason, there is a decent chunk of the fandom that anytime you bring up William Afton's motivations, go, not every villain has to have a tragic backstory. Sometimes people are just evil. Are you trying to justify
I brought this up in this stream, but I'm going to bring up, I'm going to bring up the quote that I referenced not only in this stream, but in past streams of Steelwool themselves saying why they're making William Afton's backstory interesting, not just having him kill just for the sake of it. They're doing it for other reasons. I'm gonna see if I can find it. Not the AI stuff. I want the actual interview. God, I want to pull up the interview. Because I'm not crazy. If you've seen the interview, you know what I'm talking about. You know I'm not crazy. I think his name is Ray, something at Steelwool. He talks about, like, word for word. I have heard the interview so many times that I know a good amount of it word for word. He's talking about, like, think about some of the most iconic horror characters, horror villains in media. Why is Freddy Krueger popular? Why is he iconic? It's a revenge story, isn't it? Why is Jason Voorhees popular? Right? These aren't just monsters that just kill for the sake of it. They are evil because of other wrongdoing, and they look at William Afton the same way. Like, that is quite literally the quote. And it is frustrating that I cannot find it. But there you go. If you've seen the interview, you know what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, I don't want to search through a 4-hour interview to find a 20-second clip. Unfortunately not.
Child murder? Look, William Afton is evil. But even evil people justify their own actions in their own brain. In a franchise so filled with lore, and with every character having such tragic and deep inside personal reasons for the things they do, why would you want the main antagonist to be evil for evil's sake and have no reason behind his murders besides the fact that he likes killing people? That's insane to me. That the fact that, like, Henry Emily is doing this entire FNAF 6 scheme because of a deep ridden guilt that he feels partially responsible for William Afton's crimes and is solving it doing the only thing he does best. But William Afton likes killing. You know, that's boring. And frankly, I can't argue against it. You're not giving me anything to disprove, because you're not giving me anything. So if you want to just sit there and say, sure, William Afton's evil, I'm not judging you, but I'm going to do the more personally fun thing and try to psychoanalyze this character to give a reason for why he does these things. So, let's go for the longest running theory, I believe, for William Afton's motivations. Trying to fix his child, the crying child. Or rather, in his words, put him back together. If the death of the crying child happens before the missing child incident in your timeline, then we know that it ends with William Afton vowing to put him back together. So it's pretty easy to contextualize everything he does after this as stemming from this promise. The missing child incident, the sister location remnant experiments, all of these were attempts to learn more about what happened to the crying child and see if he can recreate it in a way to induce possession. Prove that possession is possible, because if possession is possible, all he would have to do is build a lifelike animatronic of his son and have his son possess it. In essence, bringing him back to life, and he would fulfill that promise of putting him back together. And then, somewhere along the way, he fully loses his mind and is solely focused on the process of immortality, no matter who he's talking about. Mainly for himself. He wants to live forever. And I want to be very clear with my wording here. This interpretation does not imply that he actually loves his kids or was a good father. Every evidence we have shows William being a horrible, abusive father. But that being said, in his own mind, this still works and makes sense for a motivation. We can look from the outside and be like, oh yeah, he hates his kids and abuses them frequently. But in his mind, this is a problem he can solve. And if he can solve it, one that he can use for himself. He probably doesn't really care about losing the crying child. What really matters is the potential to possibly bring him back. Imagine being the man who solved death. Now, as
other details I want to expand on. One, I don't know if this has ever been confirmed because, again, this series, nothing ever gets confirmed. But I've always gone with the notion that the reason why William Afton seeks out immortality is because of remnants existing. And that's why the Funtime animatronics exist. Is because the Funtime animatronics were existed with sound illusion discs, voice mimics, claws coming out of stomachs. They were created in mind to capture kids. So, with that in mind, to capture kids, after they are captured inside the animatronic body, they are then promptly scooped out, and the Funtime animatronics, after scooping them out inside, harness their essence, the child's dead body's remnant, something, and enough of that gets harvested to be injected into William Afton to lead to his goal of immortality. That's always been my interpretation. Now, the second thing about him being an abusive, neglectful father, another thing I want to point to is that one of the reasons why Elizabeth Afton is so motivated to wanting to do right by William Afton, her father, is because she feels like an outcast. It's at least somewhat assumed, because again, this is all assumptions, that William Afton eyed and liked Henry's daughter Charlotte more than his own daughter Elizabeth Afton. Now, why does he then kill Charlotte? I don't know. But Elizabeth Afton felt spiteful. She felt useless because at every chance she got for William Afton to acknowledge her existence, he was already focused on another child, another girl. So once Elizabeth Afton died after being scooped by baby, she was so focused on trying to do right by her father, and that's all she wanted to do. Because again, when she was a child in human form, all she felt was being neglected.
Common of an interpretation as this is,
So she wanted to feel useful.
there are some admitted problems with it. If the crying child is the first death in the franchise, why does the sister location bunker exist? If the plush bear walkie-talkie is actually William Afton talking to the crying child from the sister location bunker, well then why does the bunker exist before he's doing any experimentation? Theoretically, William Afton would be down in the bunker with the Funtime animatronics and the remnant extracting scooper and all of this technology before needing to create it. Why he down there? Why he down there when no remnant? There are ways to work around this, but it's a question that's never had a satisfying answer for me personally. Until Secret of the Mimic, it's damn near certain that William Afton obtains F10 and 4, Fiona, and the Mimic post Secret of the Mimic. So the question is, what does he do with them? And what does he learn with them? Well, if he met Fiona, his obsession with immortality may have started way earlier than any of us have believed. Because here he is, finding somebody who, as far as he's aware, was perfectly recreated in artificial intelligence. Again, we know that F10 and 4 is nothing like actual real-life Fiona, but it's William Afton we're talking about. He's not really nuanced with personalities of people he barely talked to. But in essence, he's seeing the consciousness of a dead person artificially continuing. Pair this with the idea of an endoskeleton right in front of him that can recreate any person it knows about, and he's got fodder for experimentations for years. If he can figure out what makes these things tick, in essence, William Afton could live forever, even if he dies. Not to mention that Secret of the Mimic implies that the sister location bunker wasn't built by William Afton, but instead when he bought this land, he inherited that underground space and simply renovated it into the sister location we know of, which would give a reason for the bunker to exist before needing to necessarily do immortality experiments. It's sort of a yes and to the previous theory. Yes, William Afton started pursuing immortality after the death of the crying child, and he was already interested in it, learning what he did from Murray's costume manor, trying to extend life by having his dead son possess an artificial recreation of him to make the perfect continuation of life. And again, eventually losing his mind and trying to do it to himself instead. It's a theory I'm fairly partial to. It feels like a culmination of all these things we've already been thinking being given support by the franchise itself. But to be clear, again, all of that is speculation. We have no evidence as to what William Afton does with the Mimic. We just know it's very likely he gets his hands on them. So, with the tangible evidence and the speculative evidence of William Afton all out of the way, what does a character timeline for William Afton look like? Wait, how long is the video already? Oh, yeah. No. So here's the thing. Making a character timeline for William Afton.
20 minutes compared to my going on hour 15. Which looks better on the algorithm?
Is essentially just making a FNAF timeline, right? Like, all the things in this game so far happened because William Afton did some shit. So not only would that be a 30-minute to an hour-long process, and we're already this far into the video, at that point I might as well just make a full FNAF timeline, which I'm working on in the background. So I think it makes more sense to just call it here. This is the William Afton character study. This is what we knew about him definitively, and what we think about him because of what we know about him. Hopefully it's still a helpful resource for you. And honestly, we kind of basically made a timeline as we went already, if you squint hard enough. But let me know if I forgot anything in the comments below.
A FNAF timeline. Man, those videos will never die, aren't they? Again, it's just like with the Star Wars or the MCU, where every single year you have to have a new update timeline being like, hey, this 2025 timeline for Star Wars, the MCU, it's not out of date. So now we gotta have a 2026 timeline with a brand new video, brand new in-depth research being like, all right, 2025, throw all that out of the window. This is the new timeline for this year because this contradiction, this project, this project did this, did this. And again, that's one of the reasons, not to say I started this whole FNAF theory journey because of the timelines, but kind of in the same breath of that's one of the reasons, again, another reason why I did this FNAF theory stuff is because, again, there are so many games, so many books in this series, and we are still trying to solve the story to this day. And I feel like I feel like it can get complicated, confusing, and overwhelming at times, being so overloaded with information, being like, wait, what is happening more? Wait, this thing isn't new now? Wait, this character, Edwin, what's he about? And why is he suddenly so important? What's the costume memory? What's the mimic? What is F10N4? What's going on here? Why is Sun and Moon all of a sudden the most important character in the entire FNAF universe after Seek of the Mimic? It gets complicated, it gets confusing. So I do these videos just to help myself out so I can stay up to date on what's going on, but also can help you as well, so as we can follow this journey of being like, all right, we're still trying to keep up with everything going on in FNAF and trying to solve this story and trying to, have our fun at the same time. Have our cake and eat it too. But, I don't know, let me know your thoughts. What do you think about William Afton? And I'm going to leave it here. Do you think he is a tragic character? Again, I'm quoting that Steel Wool interview where they're trying to make him an iconic horror villain where they're giving him a backstory, they're giving him reasons why he does what he does, why he kills. He's not just doing it for the fun of it. Or are you one of those people who are, to me, a contrarian, and no, he's just killing just for the sake of it? And if you are one of those people, let me know in the comments, because I want to know why you think that way. I want to know.